me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire.
Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. The PlayStation 2 was the video game console of my childhood. Whilst I'm old enough to have had a Sega Mega Drive in its prime, and later a PlayStation, things didn't really get going for me until the PlayStation 2. And whilst Silent Hill 2 was my favourite game of all time and still is, I spent most of my time playing racing games. And on the PlayStation 2 there are some absolute gems of racing games. But in those long summer days, when my only real concern was how I was going to refill my glass of Sunny D without getting off the sofa, I might have had a skewed idea over what was actually good and what was actually terrible. And that brings me on to today's subject. Off-road wide open for the PlayStation 2. And despite Metallica being in the soundtrack, this game is pretty bad. I'm going to go through a few reasons why that is. So this is Test Drive Wide Open Off-Road, or Off-Road Wide Open. I've actually already forgotten. I've played a lot of Test Drive games, and most of them are better than this. There are a few different environments to race in, and yet they all somehow look kind of bland. Like the colours are kind of, I don't know, very brown. Nothing really sticks out in the environments to separate them. They're all just a little too samey. Not very fun to drive around. There's nothing really to look at. And the controls are decent enough. Like, this is a well-made game in a way. It's completely functional. It's just not very fun to play. Most of these races are checkpoint races. There are lapped races as well, but they're mostly just boiled down to taking the quickest route to the next flag. You can take multiple routes and there are shortcuts you can find, but for the most part you kind of just follow whichever computer's leading because they're going to take the quickest path. If you take another route, generally it's going to be slower. Other than that, there's not much to say. You just win and get money, and with that you can buy more cars, but you're not really going to want to stick with it. Like, you can play this game for hours, win every race, get every car, but you don't really accomplish anything. The cars feel a bit sluggish as well, which might make sense because they're off-road cars, they're not sports cars or anything. I mean, I'm driving a Ford Bronco. It's not a car known for racing around at 400 miles an hour, doing jumps. There's no damage in the game. If you make contact with another car, you just sort of bounce off it. It can ruin your whole race when they just nudge you slightly and you get caught up in the scenery. But that's not really any different to any other racing game. I guess the biggest problem with this game is there's nothing special about it. Nothing really sticks out. It's a boring, no frills racing game, of which there are thousands of on the PS2 alone, and the majority of them are better than this. The best thing about this is the soundtrack. It has a selection of rock tracks, including Fuel by Metallica. That's by far the best song on the soundtrack, and it could have done with a few more sort of mid-90s to early 2000s crappy rock songs on there. What would have been cool is a Metallica livery for the car or something Metallica themed. Because the tracks are just random parts of the scenery, you never really know where you're going to go next. Like, you're never going to memorize the routes. What you really want to do is just hopefully stumble upon a shortcut. And that makes it so much easier to win. It's cool you can interact with some of the environment, like knocking down cactuses, but it's not worth paying for the game. The car selection is pretty bad as well. As I said, the main point of the game is to race and make money, and with that you can buy more cars. So you have a selection of off-road vehicles. From the Ford Bronco, which is really the one you'll probably buy first because it's one of the cheapest. You also have Dodge Ram pickup trucks. There's a Dodge Dorado, I think. The Mercedes was pushed hard. It was on the cover of the game case. There's a Chevy Silverado and a Chevy Blazer. A couple of Jeeps and a Hummer. But there's nothing really worth buying this game for. Unless you really like one of these cars. There aren't that many of them. And you do have more powerful options for each one. So whilst there's only 10 cars, there's also 4 levels of performance: Modified, Pro and Unlimited, which cost more and more money. Which means you have to play the game a lot to unlock all of them. And you would have to be a sadist to do that. At stock level, they're pretty boring. You can change the colour of the cars, but that's it for customization. And honestly, none of the cars really feel that different to each other. Like, it has the bars for climbing and top speed and acceleration, but you won't notice the difference when you're racing these cars. So that's pretty much Off-Road Wide Open for the PS2. It's a dull game, and I would not recommend playing this one. I didn't actually enjoy capturing footage for this one, but I played it for about an hour, and it was one of the longest hours of my life. And I'm an old man, I do some boring things. I think even at the time, graphically it wasn't anything special. The gameplay is as basic as it gets, but what it's going for is Motorstorm. If you've ever played Motorstorm on the PS3, that's a souped up version of this that is a million times better. Better car variety, better environments, more fun to play. But you can sort of see the groundwork with this one. But I wouldn't recommend buying it and playing it. Maybe recommend using it as a coaster. Anyway, thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. This was just a short video to pass the time. I'll be back with more, so make sure you subscribe and have a good one.